Welcome to Barbara Ann Reichert Memorial. Thank you seriously everybody for coming today. I know this is the most awkward memorial in the history of memorials. I know a lot of people since October with this kind of were saying, why are you doing this now after 20 years? You know, the responses on Facebook was like, I just got the creepiest Facebook invite ever. And you're doing like, what happened? Did your mom die again? Like, is that possible? There's things of science. And so, yeah, basically, the reason this is happening is that I wanted to treat everyone to just the best barbecue in Mawa. That was it. I was like, let me just get a couple friends together and I'll treat them to some good barbecue. But a lot of this is just, I think as most people in this room know, and those that will be watching via satellite, you know, when my mom died, my sister was 22, I was 26, and my brother was 30. And, you know, a lot of this that happened, you know, the way it all went down is basically watching a far from normal and ordinary parent slowly die was beyond devastating and traumatizing. And then, you know, basically, as I've said this in therapy a million times, you know, I feel like I came into consciousness around 8 o'clock p.m. Tuesday, October 15th, 2002. That felt like the first day that I was on planet Earth. And realizing, oh, okay, this person that loved me, nurtured me, then would tear down and sabotage anything she had ever done for me, and codependency and toxicity and living basically in a haunted house for the first 26 years of my life, I basically started to realize instantly, while running down a rain-slicked Hamburg Turnpike thinking I could catch her ghost before Tommy and Rupa and my brother picked me up. I kind of realized within very quickly, okay, I think I'm a little damaged. I need some therapy. I need to start seeking out the advice of my friends and family to just kind of heal myself and repair myself from how, you know, we were raised. And basically, you know, just it's been a long journey for the last couple of decades, and thankful to everyone here and not here, friends and family, for just helping me along. Not completely forgive her. I'm not going to sit here and I forgive you. Like, that, just don't believe in that. I think the real lessons I've learned is life is an ongoing process. And, you know, something's always going to come up, and I think I'm not going to lie to myself or anyone else that, like, oh, it's all good. Today was a beautiful, beautiful day today, going to the mausoleum and you know, beginning the interment of her ashes. But, again, it's always going to be an ongoing thing. But the thing that really brought me to this decision to do something to honor my mother was just realizing, okay, I'm more at peace than I've ever been, and ready to celebrate her more so, and all the amazing things she did do for me and the gifts. And, you know, my friend Chris Hemsey says, you know, be better, do better. And I think those are great words of advice. And I think from the work I've done on myself and just everything connected to my mother, things are still going to be tough, and thinking about her and forgiveness, but it's getting easier, and I'm able to finally be better than I have been, be better to the people in my life, and make sure I'm not, so to speak, repeating some of the processes and steps that she took in her life. I think if you did meet my mother or knew my mother, you probably had either the phone hung up on you, maybe even not even got a welcome if you made it through the dragon's lair and the fire of our living room past her. But this is her. This is, I guess as Pete would say, Exhibit Q, Massachusetts. I don't know where this is, but it is definitely when she was very happy. Early on, I think definitely Massachusetts from what I know. And they took pictures in front of A&P back then, so that was the first selfie. So, my mother was Barbara Ann Reichert, and she was born September 25th, 1946. To, as we learned today, with the help of oh, that's her. Oh, she's born September 25th, 1946, to Kurt Reichert, who was a German-American stenographer. He made the maps for the African campaign of the Allies against the Nazis. And Ursula Reichert, who today the Grave Squad helped me find the grave of after close to 20 years of not being able to find her grave after several visits to the cemetery where my mother's now interred. So Kurt and Ursula raised my mother and my Aunt Tina. And Ursula, from what I've learned growing up, and a lot of talks with my cousins over the years, was a very tough woman. She was working as a store detective at Gimbel's, and caught many a man and woman robbing from Gimbel's, and I believe New York City or part of the Bronx. And Ursula had two sisters, Eileen and Celestine. And Aunt Celestine is the one sister I knew growing up. We would go to Aunt Celestine's house all the time in Brick, and literally come out of her house and jump into the bay. And those were some of the best memories of my childhood with my cousins and my mother. And anytime my mother was around, Aunt Celestine, who was her mother's sister, and Eileen, all these cousins, she was always the happiest. And it was kind of like those days and nights where like you could get away with not being yelled at or whatever, because she was very happy and we could play manhunt or hide-and-go-seek till dark. And as my cousins know, I ruined a lot of games of wiffle ball because I would cry, be a sore loser, and I still, as today, sucked at sports. So the one thing I learned, just in the last 10 years is that, the Sullivans were a long, long lineage of a pretty interesting family in America. Daniel P. Sullivan, who was my great-grandfather, was one of the first district attorneys of New York City. And Daniel P. Sullivan was one of the founding members of who founded Saratoga Springs, New York, which has a famous racetrack, and basically helped build this church that my brothers found. It's still there. And the other interesting thing is that there's another member of the Sullivans, I'm not sure who, maybe Edmund Sullivan, Robert Sullivan, these are like my mother's uncles, but they were in the OSS, and the OSS post Pearl Harbor was the very first incarnation of the CIA. And it was just learned a couple of years ago that my uncles were part of the OSS, and they actually were transporting the bomb dropped on Hiroshima in the Southeast Asia seas, whatever. They were actually part of that overseeing of dropping, this bomb being transported. So they had pretty big roles in the early CIA, and it's just mind-blowing because since I was in high school, I was always obsessed with the CIA and always reading every book and writing stories. And as you've seen any of my ridiculous movies, the CIA, Central Intelligence, spy, and I never knew a thing about this until literally, maybe 10 years ago to find out, wow, my family not only was in the early CIA, but they were transporting the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. So that was very interesting to learn. And then the other part, of course, is Sullivan, Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan was my mother's first or second cousin, famous TV show host, and I just was no idea who this guy was as a kid. She's like, your cousin's Ed Sullivan. Well, who's that? And when I had a book report, in 5th grade, she's like, you can do a book report on any famous person. Oh, great, I'll do it on Walt Disney or Boris Karloff. No, you're going to do it on your cousin Ed Sullivan. What? So the most boring book report in the history of book reports on a guy who started in journalism and newspaper. I'm 10 years old. What? The journalism circles of New York, and he was the most boring thing before he becomes the famous TV show host. So that was my first lesson of who my family was, and Ed Sullivan, the Beatles, and I guess there's a myth that my Aunt Tina, my mother's sister, was in the audience the night that the Beatles played. I don't know if that's true. But yeah, so all we were ever taught growing up is that, Mom went off and went to the Bahamas when she was 18, and she was this party girl. And it's just amazing today with everyone to find out that the real age that my mom lost her mother was around 17, which we had never been told this. It was always she was 20 when she lost Ursula. So it was an amazing day today with everybody's help to find wow, I'm still learning a lot about my mom and this family, that's a part of me. And so it was, I guess, in the 1970s or so, my mom would sneak to New York City to drink because it was only 18 to drink there, and I think there's a lot of crazy nights that happened. I remember her telling me this, a lot of times that she would go and party with her friends, and then she went to the Bahamas. She always had this bag that she got from the Bahamas, and it was around sometime that summer of 1971 in Seaside Heights. She met this nerdy political science major who, very out of character, was drunkenly dancing on the dance floor, and they had a fun night together. And that was my father, pictured here. I guess this is him around the time. Well, maybe a couple of years later, but that's good old Phil Pasatino, my dad. So she met my father at this Seaside Heights bar, what we're told, and he actually was with his cousin Lenny and best friend Alvin, and I didn't know this until 3 years ago, that they had been renting a cottage or house down the shore this whole summer. And he met my mother and just instantly fell in love with her. And when he went to find her the next day or that night, he said, "Oh, how can I find you? Where, I'd like to see you again." And she was like, "Oh, I'm in the phone book. You can find my name. Look me up." And that was it. She was gone. And he had a choice that summer of being with a Long Island debutante, but he chose my mother. So, good or bad, I don't know what happened to that girl. Even my father wonders, but he chose my mother. And so from the rest is kind of history, so to speak, with the birth of us kids and blah blah. So one thing about my mother was she was an amazing baker. Cook was incredible too at times, but not so great as Italian, not as good as Diane's cooking at all. Didn't come close. And I didn't have real good linguine with clam sauce until I lived with Diane and Mark and Tommy and Janelle. But she was an incredible baker. During the holidays, for birthdays, my mother, this strange farmhouse that we grew up in that was kind of haunted in some ways and weird and scary times, the oven would be on and the light in the corner of the kitchen would just have this amazing warm glow, and she would start making, chocolate chip cookies and peanut butters, Hershey Kiss cookies, cream cheese cookies, macaroons. I mean, the holidays, even if she was having a bad time, so to speak, and having a funk and not talking to us, suddenly out of nowhere, the kitchen would come to life, and she'd be making bread upon bread, Dayton nut bread as a very young kid, pumpkin bread, still the best pumpkin bread I've ever had, and a lot of the Dayton nut bread with cream cheese helped my brother's tennis lessons, made him, aspiring macaron. And he always had his cream cheese on his Dayton nut bread. And, I guess there's definitely a part of my mother, too, that was very humanitarian. It was always very strange, juxtaposition growing up, where that she could be so brutal to us, but the minute she was out in the world, she knew the butcher at ShopRite, she knew the deli guy at Pathmark, she knew this guy, and I guess at some point she started doing something for my brother's confirmation weekend to help Eva's Kitchen out, and she made a crap load of meatballs, and that eventually turned into this weird thing that she kept making meatballs for Eva's Kitchen for the next couple years, and she would just say, "There's another thing coming up, I'll make it." And so all night it would amazing meatballs. That's the one thing she did good Italian-wise as an Irish German. Most amazing meatballs. And I'm like, "Oh my God, you can't have it. It's all going to Eva's Kitchen." I was like, "What? What the heck? Do I have to become poor and homeless to get these meatballs?" So, that was always, very, very much an amazing thing that she loved donating to Eva's Kitchen constantly. And the other thing, again, recently, just thinking about, you're always thinking about different things, and when you lost a parent and the good, the bad, but lately I'm realizing that she started making fudge some point in junior high and high school, and she became obsessed with the Dutch Amish. So that there's some points in junior high we went out to Dutch Amish land in Pennsylvania. We stayed at the Dutch Amish theme park, which is just, I don't think you drive around on a donkey or something, I don't know, it was just ridiculous. We went to a pretzel factory, and we then saw how the Dutch Amish lived. And somehow part of this all made my mom obsessed with fudge. I don't know why, but she became this hardcore baker of fudge, and it was absolutely incredible. And she learned to make different versions of fudge. And so once I got into high school, every Christmas, that latest batch of teachers would get the fudge. And it was interesting to now think about the classes where I was having problems with getting up and singing. Suddenly, my grades would improve after Christmas when they got the fudge from my mother. And things would always change, and they'd be "That was the best fudge I've ever had." And it was so strange in Wayne Hills that every new year my mom would make fudge. But it would become awkward because for the new year of teachers, I go into the English room or the history room, and the last year she's, "Oh my God, that's Elliot's mom's fudge." And I'm like, "Yeah, sorry, now it's going to this year's." And so it was so strange. I can remember senior year, going in and giving it to whoever, my English teachers, and Mr. McCarthy being like, "Oh, you have to have your mother's fudge. Oh my God, I can't have it." I went, "Sorry, Mr. McCarthy, that was freshman year, this is senior year, I need to pass and go to college." So it was just interesting to think this cooking and baking was definitely helped with my relationship with these teachers. And it's interesting today, like everybody's going through a lot because of COVID, and you get old and all these things happen. But when I was 7 and my sister was probably 3 and my brother must have been like 11, we never knew the whole truth about it all, but like some form of cancer basically started to affect my mom's leg, her right leg. And so that summer, I believe it's 1982, that she went to the hospital with joint diseases, and she had her bone removed and she had a steel rod placed. And so it was a very strange summer because it was one of the best summers of my childhood, because it was like, wow, we were free, and like different friend of my father's taking us to Baskin Robbins, then we're going to Vinny's Pizza, and then I'm seeing my godparents and my cousins. And so it was an amazing fun summer. Well, my mother was definitely going through hell. And when she came back that summer, it was, today we have so many more awarenesses on how this could affect kids and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But then there was none of that. It was just suddenly now a disabled parent who had a lot of other issues kind of thrown back into the mix with their kids. So it was definitely, overwhelming, and, changed her forever. And so, the rest of her life, she would have to slide her leg to walk. And, it's just amazing now to think that starting in 5th grade, 4th grade, whatever, she would do cafeteria duty. She would come to do cafeteria duty at IHM, McElhart Mary, OLB, and she would like survey this entire huge, gigantic parking lot with just one good leg. And she would never complain, and she kept it up. And Frank Gafredo acted up. Frankie was sent to the nun's office. And so, she was a disciplinarian, and the teachers all said, Ellie, he's so quiet when his mom comes to work. So I was like, I'm terrified. I was like, nope, not going to play, not going to sing. And she definitely cock-blocked me a couple times with a couple girls in the jungle gym, but whatever. It was still awesome when she'd come to work. And, there's some great memories of she'd show up for lunch duty and say, hey, your comic books came in the mail, you got your new Star Wars mail order action figure came, so it'll be like, oh wow, that's so cool. So there was a lot of cool parts about that, and, just thinking about that. And then with my sister, then she became a Girl Scout mom, which I know some of you guys know about, and that's insane, to think about that. 3 kids, you're disabled. She then took on being a Girl Scout mom for a while, in pre-Google days, planning all these activities, and just like, finding where to do arts and crafts and this and that, and where are we going on a, orchard trip. So she was really amazing at kind of like the producing aspect that I think I've inherited a little bit of scheduling and just getting things together from vacations to whatever. And also introducing us all to kind of culture. 2 sides of every story with parents. My dad will tell you exact opposite of all this stuff, but thankfully I have a good memory, a history degree, that I know what was true and not. But my mom, no matter what, was the social person to like, we're going to do this, do that. Even if we got to do it, she'd have a meltdown. She still got us out of the house to do it. And one of the first ever Broadway show we ever saw came on a very weird surprise Monday night when we were 10 or 11. We went out to have a dinner somewhere in Haledon. There used to be like this restaurant that did dinner theater. And we went to this restaurant, and very nice Italian restaurant, and suddenly it was a surprise. You're getting on a bus to go see a Broadway show. And it was just definitely an amazing, life-changing event for the 3 of us. Like, oh my God, we never do this on a Monday, and we're going to see a show. And we're like, are we going to see Cats? Are we going to see, Family Opera? Are we going to see blah, blah? No, you're going to see a show about what a kid imagines his toy trains are doing day and night. And it's going to be performed by singing people on roller skates racing around the track. And the name of that show is Starlight Express. One of the most stupidest Broadway shows in history. I think it didn't last long, but for us still, it was an amazing night where we went in, and my mom was very, very happy that night to see Starlight Express. And it was ridiculous. I mean, I guess the respect I have is that it was this huge racetrack built above like the theater. And these roller skating actors were supposed to be toy trains. It's just a ludicrous play. But it was a beautiful memory of that kind of dedication my mom had to planning things. And, again, it was my first Broadway show, which definitely influenced me. And, vacations were always hit and miss with her. You never knew what would happen and, what would go down, because she would plan so meticulously, and then she would crash once we get there. She would, stay in her hotel room. But one of the few places that she loved was Plymouth, Massachusetts. So we were coming home from a Bar Harbor trip, which we camped a lot of times with my dad's best friend, Tom Ferrone, and his kids. And I think it might have rained. And never forget this, that we're on the road, it's already 11 o'clock at night, and if anyone's been to Maine or near Plymouth, Massachusetts, it's a very far drive from Wayne, New Jersey. And my dad's saying, the kids are not going to pee until they're back home at Beverly Way in Wayne, New Jersey. And I'm like, this is insane. And so me and my brother are like, this is nuts, what's going to happen? And somehow my mom got my dad to pull over and get a hotel for the night, and thankfully let us pee, because it would have been 4 hours in hell. And we pulled over that night into Plymouth, Massachusetts. And when we woke up the next morning, it was just amazing. I remember the sun shining, and my mom's like, well, let's go check out the town. And we went in, and that was the first time we ever saw Plymouth, Massachusetts, where, of course, the Pilgrims landed in 1620, birth of the country, Native Americans. So she absolutely fell in love with Plymouth, and a year later or so, we went back with my dad and his best friend Tom, and we had this whole full Thanksgiving in Plymouth, which it poured and rained, but it was the first time I had French onion soup. And we were in this whole hall where the Indians were all dressed up and the Pilgrims were all dressed up, and my dad bought an acre of land somewhere near the Cranberry Ocean Spray Factory, but I don't know what happened to that acre. But it was just still an amazing thing that impacted me a lot, especially as a kid, that I started to fall in love with Native Americans and history and the Pilgrims, and it's definitely part of the reason why, I've been working on a TV show about Plymouth and the Pilgrims and Native Americans involved with that part of our history for a while. And then, there's the other thing is that it's just started to realize this recently, that my mother was a great writer. We had a clickety-clackety old typewriter downstairs, and whether it was a letter to the kid, the parents, or the principal, please excuse Phil, he's got tennis practice, or please, we're sorry Elliot acted up in class today, he can't have any more sugar. They bring in cupcakes, which was the true bane of my existence for many years. So I'd be on this blacklist, oh, it's a birthday? Oh wow, chocolate chip. Sorry, Elliot, your mother sent us a letter, typewritten, you can't have the chocolate cupcakes today. And so there's even more weird stuff that happened from that scenario many times, but she'd always be writing on this typewriter, and she would write letters for work, and it's just interesting to think, lately I'm like, that clickety-clack of that typewriter underneath my floor, I would fall asleep to that, and it definitely was this subconscious kind of imprint for wanting to be a writer, and my first stories and whatever poems were all written on that very same typewriter that, I eventually ended up in my room, and it kind of all began with her. And to the day she died, she would write the most nastiest letters to people, and my dad's still haunted by some of the letters she wrote him. But always typed out, never just written, always typed out, very professionally done. I guess that CIA background of, in her, so to speak. So, that was a big influence, and as was horror movies. As everyone knows, I love horror movies. Horror lecture I do, it all started with her, that when I was 4 or 5, I went to the Wayne Public Library and was looking for books on monsters, and there were these huge orange books on Godzilla that came with a record, and there were books on Frankenstein, the Dracula, all came with records. So she'd help us get those books out of the library, and then we'd play the records that either told you a little about the monsters, or they were clips from these famous movies. So my love with old horror movies really began then. And, by the time I was 6 or 7, I'd be doing whatever in my room, and she'd yell up, "Elliot, your friends are on!" And I'm like, what does that mean? But, it always was, horror movies are on. And I'd always run to channel 911 upstairs in her bedroom, and sure enough, Bela Lugosi or Carlin were on. And, I could clearly remember this one day where she did that, your friends are on. I'd see the end of something, and then I'd put on a towel over my head, and I'd grab one of her canes. And I remember going out, one of my first performances on my lawn and making Dave Hayek laugh. And I remember being this guy wants to kill me because I keep breaking his toy guns, but I made him laugh. I'm okay, maybe that's the direction I need to go and keep doing this. So she was very influential on me becoming an actor and, again, a love of horror movies. A lot of that kind of led to the 90s, and basically, 94, my dad moved out, they got separated, beginning of a season in hell, so to speak, in college, where I'm living at home with my mother and my sister. But it suddenly came that, I don't know how it happened, but on Monday nights, my sophomore year, it starts to become that George is coming over, and Kevin the Irish warlord Healy is coming over, and Dan the shoulderless Dutch boy Crolius is coming over, and suddenly we're like having these weird Monday nights where we're drinking and sneaking beer in at my mom's house, and I'm like, oh God, if I get caught, I'm dead. And the next day, one of these days in that fall, she found a six-pack of Rolling Rock or Honey Brown, and I was like, I'm dead. And she was like, I'd rather you just do it here than go drink in your cars and what people used to do back then. Like, I'd rather you drink it here, sober up, order a pizza, and not do something stupid. And somehow my friends translated that as party at Ellie's house now. And it was very quickly that Dan, who had no interest in acting, never, probably to this day, has never acted again. The bunch of us then started doing the very first Weekland Pictures films every Monday and Thursday at my house, because some reason my mom, she could be waking up instantly if I asked her for something, but then she also could sleep through everything. So all through college, the formation of Weekland Pictures, as it became in my film career, all started on Mondays and Thursday nights with cap guns going off and fake blood, and we're in the backyard shooting each other. And if we got to the park below, Jerry Botman dressed up as an overweight skull mask superhero. So it was all began at this house, overseen by my mother, and it's just amazing because I think, if my parents had stayed together, that would never happen. And I think if my dad was even in the picture, I don't think this could have happened. Us just filming late night, all night, and making just these crazy movies. And, the only time my mother ever woke up in all those times was when Jerry farted very loudly, I remember one night, and it was so intense, I was like, there's no way she could have heard that. And suddenly you just heard a slamming on the floor above us. What's burning down there? And I was like, it's Jerry farting, and she was like, get out! And she could come to life so quickly, even one leg, and we're like, wait, no, Steiner, go! And that was many, many nights where we just fled the house next to this Duane's Diner in fear of my mother. So, it was, there was likely a lot of formative years at the house where, things, definitely, if it wasn't for her allowing some of these crazy things to happen, I wouldn't be the filmmaker I am today. And I think, at the end of the day today, there's still so much work I would love to do, for the sake of my siblings and my family, but I've had to accept the reality that the demons that my mother carried and are basically, a part of the bloodline, basically. I've come to understand through therapy and life and friends and everything. Those demons exist, and we're all very unique individuals. And I think, today, it's just best to just do what I can in life and be happy and grateful for the friends and family that I do have, and that, just hope for the day that maybe what we did today, that everyone came together to do, and celebrating her and having a place that lays her to rest officially, finally, that, maybe someday it could bring somewhat more peace and healing to my entire family. So, thank you for coming today, and I guess just one last toast to my mother, Barbara and Reichert. Thank you guys. Love you all. Thank you. Cheers. Cheers.